Hey, it's Rachel. This year I am posting monthly garden updates on major progress or projects as we go through the gardening season, and this is the July update. Because of travel, I'm doing this one a little late. It's coming in early August. Sorry about that. I will start with the buckwheat meadow next to me. This was last month's project, and as you can see, it is very well established and has created a pollinator paradise wrapping 3 full sides of my garden. Honeybees, bumblebees, and other pollinators absolutely adore buckwheat, and they've come in droves to enjoy it. Having a lot of these helpers around is beneficial to everything else. Let's talk about everything they're pollinating, starting in the northwest corner of my garden. I'm going to duck into the shade here real quick to say that I will also post a link in the description down below to the video about this overall garden design in case you would like to see that in any great detail. Otherwise, I'm just going to show you the garden starting from the northwest and kind of going clockwise through the whole space. My blackberries are mostly finished with flowering and are now covered in a heavy fruit set, while my ever-bearing raspberries are just beginning to set their second crop on their primocanes with the help of some very enthusiastic pollinators. Moving clockwise to those arched trellises above the chicken run, this became a total jungle while I was on vacation. I've since pruned it back into something resembling submission. It is absolutely loaded up with cherry tomatoes, pumpkins, and squash, and the pollinators are visiting all of these regularly. Just south of that is bed 9. You can see my bush drying beans are loaded up with a heavy crop, lots of pods. The mustard cover crop that I talked about in June that I was using to camouflage my squash and melon vines from pests like vine borers, it's on the south half of this bed. It has since died back, but it seems to have done its job. I somehow had a volunteer Tramontino squash plant pop up in this bed. No idea how. I was not growing Tramontino here last year, but for now I've just moved it aside, dragged it up onto this fence, and I've allowed it to kind of combine with the other volunteer Tramontino squash that popped up in my compost bin. You can see these have had more pest pressure and are starting to struggle a bit, but they were just a trap crop, and I've already gotten a few bonus harvests off of them, so for me, I'm calling that a win. Meanwhile, these guys down here seem to be really unbothered by any kind of pest pressure and are doing quite well. So I think the mustard cover crop was a good approach, and I'm going to do it again next year. South of that is my brassica bed. I have my Brussels sprouts on the north side and quite a bit of kale along the south side. We're past the worst of the cabbage moth pressure at this point, and I've gone ahead and removed those row covers to let those guys breathe and expand. Next is the potato bed. I recently turned off the drip irrigation water supply to this bed in anticipation of harvesting them. We're not having any rain in the forecast for at least a couple of weeks, and you can see they're starting to peter out and I think are ready to go. I'm hoping for a nice harvest out of these guys in a few days. My perennials are otherwise just kind of clicking along. You can barely see, but I do have the apple trees starting to train into a cordon along this cattle panel fence. To make use of the space while these apple trees are sizing up, I did use this as a bean trellis this year. I have pinto varieties down here, and I have cannellini beans growing along the northern edge of it. They're doing quite well, setting a good crop, and when I cut them off at the base, they should release some nitrogen into the soil to further support the growth of the apple trees into the fall and winter. Once we get into our first frost and these beans have died back, I will take the opportunity to go back in and reprune those apple trees. You can see it's starting to pop up above the top of the fence. I need to trim that and encourage lateral branching, but that will be a task for later this fall. The pole drying beans in my broccoli bed have climbed and covered this cattle panel arch quite nicely, creating a good shady microclimate underneath for the broccoli, along with the beans that you can see starting to set and hang down here. I was really happy with this approach. I've struggled in the past with broccoli that bolts too quickly. This year, I've had a much more successful harvest. I had a really good production in the spring, followed by some really nice side shoot production coming off after that. All in, I got over 20 kilograms of broccoli out of this bed. It's way better than I've done before, to the point where I'm starting to run out of room in the freezer for it. FYI, I grew the Green Magic variety of broccoli this year. It's a hybrid variety, not an open pollinated heirloom, but I was really happy with its performance, and I'm going to grow it again in the future. Yeah, okay, moving on to the sweet potato bed. You can see I have not even tried to contain this at this point. The sweet potatoes are taking over everything. I think I will trim off some of these longer vines that are spilling over the edges and use them to start some slips for next year, but otherwise I just encourage these things to go as crazy as they want to go. Now, I did have a couple more volunteers pop up out of this bed. Last year I grew paste tomatoes in this bed, along with some pole drying beans on the same trellises. And you can see I had one volunteer paste tomato come up, as well as at least one bean. I just dropped this cattle panel against the fence to give that somewhere to go and dragged it up out of the way. Otherwise, I'm leaving these volunteers to just do their thing. I'm going to compare when I harvest the sweet potato bed. I'm going to look and see whether or not the plants in the immediate vicinity of these volunteers had either a negative or positive effect from the presence of these volunteers. For now, I thought it was an interesting experiment to go ahead and let them grow. The main update this month is in the southwest corner, my roots bed. I still have a few straggling beets and carrots on the north edge that I'm allowing to size up, but the south edge of it had my onions. I harvested those once the tops had yellowed and fallen over. They're now sitting in my well-ventilated greenhouse, curing out of direct sunlight exposure. I replanted the south half with fall and winter carrots, and that required some serious soil prep. I'll do a separate video on this, but suffice it to say, I invested quite a bit of physical labor to deeply loosen that soil and prepare a nice seed bed ahead of those carrots. My frequent access bed is doing well. I've removed the vast majority of the spring greens as they bolted, and once I get rid of these last few here, I'm going to replant it along the drip irrigation in a different layout with my fall greens. That'll be a mixture of arugula, red mustard, and different lettuces. I did try this year to put a few plants in the concrete blocks lining my bed. I have a couple of cherry tomato plants in here, a volunteer paste tomato that I relocated from a different bed, cucumber plant here, and the one Tramontino squash that I planted intentionally. Overall, these plants are doing pretty well, and I'm not unhappy with the performance of them. But when I compare them to some of my volunteers or some of my plants in other beds that are in full soil, they are certainly delayed. For that reason, I think next year, I'll put the vining crops just to the inside of the trellis in the main soil bed, and I will reserve these blocks on the outside for things like herbs or pollinator plants. Beds 1 and 7 happen to be next to each other this year. Those are my paste tomato and pepper beds, as well as some edamame. They're doing quite well. Good fruit set on everything, including the peppers, to the point where the trellises are almost starting to strain under the weight of this fruit set. Really happy with that. I am having something nibbling on my edamame plants. I am getting still a little bit of a crop off of these guys, but I'm not sure it really was worth the space that I dedicated to them. Last but not least, my currently fallow will be winter brassica bed, also covered with a bean trellis. The pollinators have discovered the Cherokee Trail of Tears pole drying beans on here, and I'm starting to get some nice pods developing here as well. This should make for a really nice area for those winter brassicas once those transplants are sized up and ready to go outside. I hope these updates are useful and interesting for everybody. In a couple of weeks, I'll give an update on the yield out of the system as part of my backyard diet series, tracking how close I can get to nutritional sufficiency out of my own backyard. I also have a video in the works on pruning raspberries and blackberries because I have had several questions about it, and this is the perfect time of year to stay on top of that task. If you have any questions or if there's anything I failed to mention, please post below and I will do my best to respond. Otherwise, until next time, thanks.